Thank you so much, Kirby, Brad, Jonathan, and Matt. The world won't get no better if we just let it be. So much of our spirituality is about letting it be. And yet, it's not going to get any better if we just let it be. You know what we're doing here again, right? Yes. I can't even list them all. I'm sure you've seen the news as much as I have. More shootings. Here, there, and everywhere. Churches, medical centers. So, yeah, we have to find a way to talk about this and be with it and not just let it be, but to be the light. And you'll notice that to be the light, we don't just let the candle sit there. We actually light it. And we have to find a way to light ourselves and to light our country, to light up humanity. Wake up, everybody. That's what it means to have an awakened humanity. To awaken to spiritual magnificence, to awaken to truth, to awaken to how we imagine life unfolding in a way that is sane, hopeful, supportive, empowered, not just for some, but for everybody. So, I don't know about you, but I find these times very challenging for my spiritual path. I want to know what's going on. I want to contribute to what's going on. I don't want to be overwhelmed by what's going on. I don't want to be sucked into, ain't it awful, and it's always going to be this way, because it's always been this way. And yet I don't want to deny the reality of what's going on. I don't want to deny the pain that it's causing or the pain that people are experiencing to cause them to behave in ways that are so heinous and out of alignment with spiritual truth. So I feel like I'm in a whole nother way of digging deeper into my spirituality. And as the spiritual leader of a community, Karen and I spend a lot of time talking about what's ours to do. What's ours to do as a spiritual leader? Do we continue to support each of us in our personal magnificence? Do we look at the larger context? How do we talk about it without it feeling like, oh God, I get this all week. I come to church for sanctuary and refuge, and I don't want to talk about it anymore. And yet we must. So it's a deep reach for me as well, as a spiritual leader, to not only find my place, my thoughts, my way of practicing in my own life, but to feel as though I can provide something that may be of help or use to you. So this month, we're going to walk that walk together. And I'm simply going to let you in on my own process, how I process these things, what I do with it, with my own spirituality. Maybe it will help you. It's not meant to be dark or hard or heavy, and yet there are many things about these times that are dark and hard and heavy. What I know to be true beyond the shadow of a doubt is the very teaching that we use for ourselves, we can use to heal, to make a difference, to wake up, and to wake up humanity. It is the very tools that we use as individuals that we can use for the healing of collective consciousness. So, as Joe said, although my slide has a lovely typo in it, Thanks to autocorrect, I'm sure. We are not, oh, so it's been fixed. Thank you so much, Joseph. Yes. Reimagining me and we, spirituality in the world. That's not what it originally said. It actually said something a little different. Reimagining me and we, spirituality in the world, right? Sacred disruption, reimagine everything. And so we have to find a way of reimagining how we are going to navigate these times. And one of the things that I notice, and one of the things that I love about Kirby and the band doing that song, is how many of the songs from the 60s are so utterly relevant today. Right? Yeah. Somehow we didn't learn something there, so we're getting to do it again. And we're going to keep getting to do it again until we actually do the work that really needs to be done. And that is to reimagine humanity, to reimagine me and we. I want to read from a book called The Four Pivots, Reimagining Justice, Reimagining Ourselves. This is a book recently published, written by Dr. Sean Ginwright. He's a professor at Santa Clara University and a member of Heart and Soul Center for Spiritual Living. And he wrote this fabulous book, and I'm going to read you a few things from the introduction. I've come to realize that as a society, we don't really do a good job at preparing, teaching, or training people how to be vulnerable, cultivate empathy, and practice self-reflection. But isn't that exactly what we do here at CSLDallas and in our spirituality? This is all the stuff that makes us human. Healing involves more than repairing the deep wounds of racism, healing the scars of sexism, or easing the pains of poverty and war. Healing is the capacity to restore our humanity and care for ourselves and others, even in the midst of our fear. Healing is the only pathway to real justice because it requires us that we take an honest look at what harmed us and pushes us to restore our humanity, and finally to move us confidently into a possible future. Reimagining me and we is reimagining how we walk this walk, not necessarily going back to the ways that we tried to do this in the 60s, or before that, or before that, or before that, but to reimagine spirituality in the world as the basis from which we come. I loved this meme when I found it. Is that just amazing? Have you ever thought about that? Me, we. Okay, watch. I'm going to flip it. I want you to know I, in fact, flipped that picture. That was not a trick. It was, in fact, flipped. Right? Wow. Just like take that in. Me and we. The truth is there's no separation. Should we flip it again? One and the same. We say in spirituality, don't harm another because you're only harming yourself. And sometimes I think we say it in that sort of sense of enlightened self-interest. Well, I don't want to harm myself, therefore I shouldn't harm anybody else, which still is about me, right? But the truth is, there's only one self. There's only one humanity. There's only one life. And we're all part of it. We're all expressing that life. And each one of us contributes in a way that awakens humanity or doesn't. Each one of us contributes in a way that brings a little more healing, a little more connection, a little more truth, which isn't always the same thing as the way we think of love, but also a little more love. This whole month, we're going to ask ourselves, can we reimagine this me and we? We're going to begin. I want you to really pay attention to the words of this invocation song. I will be. And I want you to ask yourself the question as we go through this month, that today and this month, am I really willing to be what Spirit needs of me? So, I find it very easy to be whatever it is my granddaughter needs of me. Because she's a place of pure love and joy, and I want her to have the best start in life that she can have. And I know that I can contribute to that. Pretty much anything the ministry needs of me to be, I'm willing to be. And have for more years than I care to say out loud. Whatever's required, I'm willing to do it. But I notice that sometimes there's an edge to my willingness when it becomes uncomfortable, when I'm concerned about offending someone, when I worry about the backlash, when I wonder what happens if someone doesn't agree. Are they going to leave the community? Or I put something out on Facebook, or Karen and I do a prayer on Facebook. Are we going to invite unintended consequences from that, from people outside the community? Am I really willing? Am I really willing to be what Spirit needs of me? Am I willing to ask the question and try to listen to the answer without being afraid? Well, okay, that's stupid. Of course I'm afraid. Without being uncertain, that's just as stupid. Of course I'm uncertain. But without letting those things get in the way. Finding my way through them. And I think these are the questions that are pertinent when I think about reimagining me and we and bringing spirituality into the world. I sing that song, oh yes, use me to be the light. And it's safer to be the light on my meditation cushion when I'm doing a spiritual mind treatment for the humanity awakening. It's good, it's important, it's valuable, it's necessary. I do it every single day. Every day. Because my spiritual mind treatment is not conditioned on anybody else's, or on anybody else's thoughts or beliefs or ideas, because that is the word of Spirit being spoken as me. And that's true for you too, when you speak the word. When you do your spiritual mind treatment and your spiritual work around spiritual awakening, you and Spirit are a majority, and you are making a difference. And it's important. And then there's the place where our spiritual work meets the world. And we are wandering around in the world. And we are engaged with what the world is doing. I don't know about you, how many of you with partners and kids and family members, and you think, what in the world are you doing? Right? And so what I noticed in the last number of years is that I've done a lot of shaking of my head. I just don't even believe it. Like, how is this possible? Aren't we in the 21st century already? Haven't we learned these lessons? And do you know that shaking my head and asking those questions doesn't do anything? And it's part of the way in which I don't engage, because I think somehow it's going to magically get better. But it's only going to get better if I'm willing to work at it. If I'm willing to work at it in consciousness, I'm willing to work at it in our community, I'm willing to work at it out in the world, in whatever ways seem right and truthful and appropriate for me, for you, how you decide to engage. Oh, wait a minute. My slides are out of order. Uh-oh. I'm going to skip forward, Joseph. Don't follow. We're going to... Oh, man. Wait a minute. I've missed a slide. Oh, there we go. We're going to this slide. So what I do when I start trying to find a place to stand... No, let me say that again. When I start trying to figure out what in the world is going on and where am I going to find a place to stand, I start with my spirituality. And then I look for a framework that helps me understand what might be going on. This is a framework some of you have heard me talk about in the past. This is called Spiral Dynamics. It's written and created by a man named Don Beck, who is a friend of this community. He's actually been here a number of times, many years ago. And this is a product of years and years and years of research into cultural development. Now, one of the things that has been a product of the scientific revolution for us in humanity today is this idea that things are evolving. So we got it from Darwin, thanks to the finches and the Galapagos Islands, right? And then we began to apply that to other things. We began to notice development and evolution. So people like Erickson and Piaget, they talked about it, about the human being, the evolutionary or developmental project that we as human beings have at every stage of our development. So the infant has a project, the toddler has a project. You know what that is. No and mine. That's the toddler's project, right? Because they're discovering that they're a separate person, that they actually have things they want and things they don't like. And on it goes. The teenager is doing the terrible twos at a mega volume so that they can separate from their family and go be their own person, right? The young adult has a project, middle age. There's a project of development, right? I discovered the other day that, wow, I might just really have to own my wise woman. I think that I have passed over into crone. Yes, right? Like, wow, that's like a whole nother point of view, and my project is different now. So the same thing is true about cultures. About societies and cultures. They have given some sense of this developmental project to societies and cultures and people within societies and cultures. It's not a necessarily one-size-fits-all. It's not necessarily exactly the same in a culture, right? And even in our culture here at CSLDallas, we're not necessarily all on the same place in our spiritual development and our personal development. So Spiral Dynamics tries to give some language to this framework, and it is intended, just like we teach in the science of mind, to be an upward spiral of ever-expanding evolution. And it is the evolution of cultural consciousness. And so if you start at the bottom, instinctive culture, right? This is where we're in survival mode. We're just trying to get our lives taken care of, right? And that's the worldview where nothing else matters but food and clothing and shelter. And if you think of the number of refugees that we have in the world today, most of them, unfortunately, have come back to this point in their lives. The worldview is simply food, water, and shelter. As we start moving up the spiral, the next piece is that group consciousness, animistic, tribal consciousness, and then we move up to the dominant consciousness, which is power, my personal power. And we see that in the feudal societies. We see that in the cultures where there is a strong, independent leader who really is in charge pretty much of everything. And then we go up to the authoritarian worldview, which is a structure. It's creating a structure of authority that everybody needs to be a part of, right? When this worldview really came in the West, what it gave us was the Catholic Church, both good and bad. But it also gave us all of our justice and laws and trial by jury and all of those kinds of things where the dominant person couldn't just say off with her head or cut off his arm, but there's actually structure that provides authority, right? And then you can see as we swing up the spiral, achievist, where it's the breaking out of that authority and it's the personal achieving. I can be successful. I'm going to make a success of myself. No, I'm not going to follow in my father or mother's footsteps. I am going to grow and evolve. And then we keep going up the spiral. I love this term, communitarian. Communitarian. So a humanitarian that also sees that it's about community. It's about the fact that we are all part of this, and this worldview gives us all of our civil rights and women's rights and pride and ADA and all the ways in which we recognize that we are actually all in this together. And then it goes on up into a systemic point of view that recognizes it really isn't just the individuals that are running amok. It is actually the systems that are in place that are challenging. And ultimately, this holistic point of view where we recognize that all of this is going on and we have to navigate it. Now, what you'll notice is that on this slide, there's a me and a we. And the spiral is essentially an evolution between me and we. And when the me side gets overly, basically toxic and out of control, what happens is that births the next worldview, which is inevitably a we worldview. And when that we worldview goes too far and becomes too oppressive, to groupthink, to you must follow the rules or you're sinful and evil and wrong, right? The next corrective comes to the forefront to say, wait, no, I count too as an individual. And you can watch in cultures and nations, in societies, you can watch this evolution. And you can also see where places and people get stuck in a particular worldview. We are, particularly in this country, we are stuck between the authoritarian, achievist, and communitarian worldviews. I don't know if stuck is the right word. It's really not the right word. What's happening is that these correctives are trying to move the worldview forward. And some of us don't like to move forward. We don't like change. What we'd rather do is go backwards to what we know. And so part of what's going on today is this clash of worldviews. You'll hear it called a culture clash. Ultimately, it's a clash of values and a worldview of what is motivating people, what is making the world a safe place, or what is giving language to the purpose of human life. And it's a constant swing from me to we. Me, the shooter, we, the kids in school. Me, the person who's going to go greedy, get as much $1 billion as I possibly can, and we, the people who are reorganizing labor unions. Me, the person who is afraid of people that are different than how I look or think or act, to the we that says, wait, we're all in this together. We're all a part of this. In The Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes says there's no such thing as private good. There's no such thing as private good. Private good always has to come within the good for all. I can't want anything for myself that I don't want for everyone. And you see, that is seeking to bridge that gap of me and we. And it's a huge paradox. And that kind of thinking is, you can see further up the evolutionary scale. That kind of thinking is systemic thinking and holistic thinking. And it's hard work, not only to think that way, but to walk in the world that way, to act that way, and to help people see that there might be another way. The biggest challenge with the spiral dynamics, the biggest challenge that it reminds us of, is that developmental stages can't be skipped. A child does not become an adult. A child becomes a teen, then a young adult, then a full-fledged adult. There's a developmental project, and we can in fact get stuck. How many, 40-year-old teenagers do you know? Right? And how many of us are sometimes teenagers too? We can get stuck and they can linger. So when we can see some of this that is going on, when we can see a systemic reality that is going on, do you see we can stop making people wrong? This is one of the ways I'd like for us to reimagine me and we, to bring our spirituality in the world. And that is to stop making people wrong, to stop vilifying those that see it differently, to try to the best of our ability to recognize that individuals' behavior may be out of a worldview or out of fear or out of anger or out of ignorance, but in and of itself, each and every person, human being, is a child of the One, is a divine, individualized manifestation of an infinite life. And this could quite possibly be some of the hardest work we have to do. Can we separate those two things and give ourselves permission to say that behavior, no, that behavior is unacceptable. No, that's not allowed. If we're going to be one human family sharing this globe, you cannot do that. And I know that you too are a place of love and light, seeking to express itself. Can we separate out those two things, not from arrogance because we're so spiritual that we can see it, right? But from the deep humility that says, I know what it looks like and feels like to behave poorly, to be angry, to be afraid. Thank God I've never picked up a gun, but if all the people that I wished dead throughout my entire life were dead, there would be less people walking around on the planet. Is that not true? And I'm thinking I'm not alone in that. Right? Why do I not follow through on those feelings? Oh, I may think it. Why do I not follow through on those feelings? Why do you not follow through on those feelings? Because you've learned something new. You've learned who you are. And you've learned what it means to stand in relationship to others, to seek to be the best that you can be. You've healed from all those things that caused you or me to want that. The most important aspect of social change is not problem analysis, power building, narrative change, or coalition building. It's healing. The regularity of mass shootings, innocent citizens gunned down by police, urban youth violence, rural opioid use among youth, and we could say the epidemic of suicides among our young people and our veterans, all have one thing in common. They are symptoms of a society that is broken. Americans are more depressed, commit suicide more frequently, and have little hope in the future, and our leaders have no idea what to do about it. America's capitalistic culture based on individualism, fear, and scarcity is toxic and has taken a toll on how we work, live, and relate to one another. We can feel it when we go to work, we can see it when we turn on the television, and we can hear it when we listen to the news. The solution to these challenges won't be found through progressive or conservative politics. A deeper shift is needed in our values and our ability to heal from the wounds of racism, sexism, and poverty. It is the healing. It's the healing of consciousness. It's the healing of our hearts. It's the healing of our sense of separation. It's the healing of our fear. It's a willingness to seek peace and harmony in the paradox of me and we. Let us sing this not as a hope, not as a wish, but as an affirmation for the light that we are in the world.
And 1, 2, ready,
joy inside of me. I got love in all that I do, and the wisdom to know the truth. I got peace and harmony. I got joy inside of me. I got love in all that I do, and the wisdom to know the truth. Joy and harmony, peace, love and joy and harmony, peace, love and joy and harmony, peace, love and joy and harmony. I got peace and harmony. I got joy inside of me. I got love in all that I do, and the wisdom to know the truth.
So much. Was it a little weird to go from that heavy talk into that song? How do you feel at the end of singing that song? Better, right? That is the practice. Do you see? It is heavy, it is hard, it is challenging, but if we allow ourselves to stay there, we just are staying there. Right? And it is awkward and weird and like, I don't feel like being positive right now because I'm feeling all like, and so I kind of did that to you on purpose. Right? So you would feel like, okay, this is weird. Like, what do you mean I'm going to sing about peace and harmony right now? I'm all verklempt about all that's going on in the world. But that's exactly the point. right? That is exactly the point. That is what we need to do as spiritual beings, is to do that. Not because we're pretending that stuff doesn't exist, but because we're affirming who we are and how we are going to be in the world, where we're going to stand, the light that we're going to bring. And yes, sometimes that's work, and it feels weird. And yet when we do it, we feel better. And it's not just that we're feeling better. I promise you that when you do this work, you are marrying the me and the we. You are marrying it, because the very work that you're doing to shift your consciousness, to pull yourself out of the fear or the sense of separation or the anxiety or the depression or whatever it is that you're feeling, right? As you pull yourself out of that and stand on awakened humanity, you are shifting consciousness for the we, not just for yourself. And this is why this work is so critically important, and why it matters that we're doing it, especially in the moments that are the hardest. It takes practice, diligent, constant awareness, and then to practice. Where can I stand? Where can I go to shift my heart, my mind? Not, again, I want to say this over and over and over again, not to pretend it's not happening, not in some magical, wishful thinking, Pollyannish, if I just be good, everything will be fine. No, but to recognize that we are contributing to the healing by not being pulled into the rabbit hole of, it's always been this way, it'll never be any different. That is the most significant rabbit hole that we have to continually move ourselves out of. One of the ways that, let me start that sentence over again. One of the reasons it's so difficult to do what we just did is because we are constantly confronted by the polarity that we're dealing with. The polarity of how good our life is and how bad it is for others. The polarity of how bad we feel about the news, heartbroken, and how much we can experience the love in our community or in our meditation practice. Do you see, these are called polarities. And one of the things that we can do, this is the other framework that I use to really pay attention to what's going on for me and what's going on around me, is to really recognize that we're constantly in the space-time continuum, we're dealing with the pairs of opposites. The Hindus have been preaching this for God knows how many thousand years. Right? While the infinite is absolute, there's only joy, there's only love, there's only beauty, there's only the potential for those things in its absolute state. The moment that it's expressed into finite reality, into the space-time continuum, instantly in that moment you have the polarity of it's expressed or it's not. It's fully present or it's not. And this is the constant challenge of living in the human experience. While our spirit is always working to be grounded in the truth, the human experience is this constant flow of polarities. And it's not dissimilar to what I just showed you in spiral dynamics, the polarity of me and we, right? And that is an evolutionary process. Each time we go too far on the me or the we, and then the worldview begins to correct itself. A new awakening happens within the collective consciousness, and a new idea gets birthed, and it pulls us and awakens us into the opposite direction. And each one is intended to be a corrective when the one before has gotten too far out of alignment. That's called polarity management. And what we have to do for ourselves is to manage our own polarity of being pulled into the challenge of the very real world things that are going on, and our desire and our moments of experiencing deep and profound centeredness and love, and all is well with the world, right? And the challenge that we have is that we don't, okay, that was 3 sentences. I was trying to start all at the same time. Okay, so the challenge is you cannot stop the polarity. Sorry to say, because it's part of the human condition. Just like you can't say in the finite space-time continuum, I'm going to be so spiritual that I'm never going to have to deal with up and down ever again. Right, good luck with that, because it's in the fabric of the space-time continuum, the polarities, the pairs of opposites. That's what it means to be expressed in the finite forms. So it's not that polarities are going away, it's that we can begin to pay attention and watch in our own lives when we're being pulled, and when we get into that polarity and it becomes negative. You'll notice that when it becomes negative, the way to not get stuck there is to pull ourselves up to the other side, what's needed. So if I'm feeling overwhelmed, depressed, utterly dumbfounded or angry about what's going on in the world, and I find myself stuck in there, right? So we have to force ourselves to sing some kind of, spiritual song. They were like, okay, whatever, right? I'm going to do my treatment, talk to a practitioner, do whatever. We're going to pull ourselves back up. But we can pull ourselves up over there so much that we do a spiritual bypass. And then we're in the negative because we're pretending that there's nothing wrong and everything's fine and it's all going to be okay when it's actually isn't quite yet there, right? And so now we're in the negative side of that spirituality, and we have to pull ourselves back out and say, no, we do actually have to look at the human condition and bring that light into the human condition. Do you see? This is the polarity, and we're dealing with it every single day, every time we look at the news, every time we do our spiritual mind treatment, every time we find ourselves wondering, how are we going to manage it? It's a little exhausting, isn't it? What I want to do is normalize it for you. You're not doing anything wrong. You're not. It is exhausting. It's exhausting when we try to flatten it. It's exhausting when we try to pretend it's not happening. It's exhausting when we think it shouldn't be happening. But if we can recognize that this is a normal part of the human condition. Our spirit is infinite, and it is big enough to hold the polarity. It's big enough to hold the paradox. The last thing I want to read to you from this book, The Four Pivots. So the question is, are we devolving or evolving in our collective capacity to engage in conflicting ideas and in conflict itself? How do we discern when to hold someone accountable and when to deploy grace? How do we learn to elegantly dance between the two? These questions ultimately will advance our discourse and movement in transformative ways. This is the question for ourselves and how we are engaging with others. To dance in the polarity. When are you going to hold someone accountable for an inappropriate behavior? And when do you give grace? When do you do that for yourself? When do you hold yourself accountable for having fallen into the negative, for vilifying someone on the other side? And when do you give yourself grace? How do you pull yourself out? Do you see? It is our spiritual grounding, the infinite reality of the truth of our being, that gives us that container. And when we can be in that container, we can create a circle. We create a circle of love. So this is going to be our spiritual mind treatment for today. I invite you to Open your heart and open your minds, and let's build a circle of love.
And 1, 2, 3.